Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and all of you co hosts out there, brilliant as you are in the greater tabletop role playing game community. Thank you very much for allowing this show to be as brilliant as it is, simply by your presence. Now, today this is, uh, Third Pillar Thursdays are like one of my favorite. It is a subject that gets me excited, and I love talking about it. For those who do not know, uh, Third Pillar Thursdays or Third Pillar of Exploration Thursdays are where we talk about, well, one of the third pillars of role playing games. Of course, one of the pillars being combat, a second pillar being social interactions, role playing, and our third pillar, exploration. Um, it, Seasonally and cyclically, this subject comes up a lot when it comes to, um, hey, excuse me, I want my players to travel from A to B, and it is a treacherous travel. How do I, run a game involving this? And my players are going into the dark caves of, and fill in the blanks or something. How do I use this in my game? And I think, it, strangely enough, exploration and the environment and obstacles and traps and puzzles and using the environment itself is used in nearly every other intellectual property and media that we absorb in our geekosphere. Yet we still have a hard time imagining using it in our games. And I think we need to break down that barrier. I don't think it's very as difficult as we would like to think it is. I think it's just an atrophied muscle. It's using those ligaments and that we really haven't used in such a long time, if at all, in most role playing games. And a lot of times, those elements are brushed over. But this week, we're talking about light and darkness, a little bit of good and evil mixed in there. And I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to go very arcane, very larger than life, rather than talking about the usual things that I tend to bring up when it comes to using exploration, where it's natural environments and weather hazards and things like that. Let's go a little bit. Let's go planescapey in this one, and talk about some amazing things that we can use. And it made me even think about a couple of documents that I had sitting in the background, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. I remember doing this thing years ago, or doing something like it years ago. But anyway, so one of the little preambles I wrote to send the link out for the show was, like, what if the classic blood war that is happening between our fiendish enemies out there in Dungeons and Dragons, the demons and the devils, and what if their blood war spilled over into the prime material plane, and the angelic hosts from the goodly planes, the angels and all the lawful, neutral, and chaotic good angels descended down and started having this massive war in the prime material plane, and your player characters have to navigate this world. And we always associate goodness and light, goodness with light and darkness with evil, but we might be able to flip the script on it and use this for environmental hazards and such. So what do we mean by exploration? I think there's three methods of ways to think about exploration. Kind of like in combat, we think of like ranged combat and sneaking around. We think of melee combat and punching people in the throat. We also have various techniques we can use in combat, where there's pushing and shoving and tripping and disarming people and sundering shields and all that kind of business. And I think exploration is like that as well. For example, we have ourselves the montage travel trope of the player characters need to travel for days, weeks, months, from one region to another. We don't want to necessarily roll every single hour of that travel, but what we want to do is we want to do a montage of that. And that is one method of doing it. Now, of course, you could just literally hand wave it. Oh, you have to make a 6-week trip through the accursed desert. All right, you start on day one. you're trudging through the sands, hand wave, it's 6 weeks later or something, you've arrived at the crypt as if nothing happened. But many of us that are world creators are like, well, that kind of doesn't make sense, both narratively and mechanically, because we want there to be some forms of trouble when they get to the other side, right? If there's gonna be an accursed desert, there needs to be a desert that has an effect on the players, and there needs to be some accursedness that happens to them as well on their travels. And for me, this is where a concept of the 5 room dungeon comes in the sense of, no, you don't need to role play every hour of that trip, but maybe we can start to role play and zero down in and focus on what the players are doing during the important moments of that trip. And so, much like in any good story, you zoom out, you see your Legolas and Gimli's running across the battlefields, and then we focus in on when the orcs find them and they're riding on these giant wargs and they're attacking the party, and that's where we focus on things. Whether it's a monster attack, or the PCs meet a caravan, or they need to cross a raging river over a rickety wooden bridge and they're not sure how to do it, those kind of things, and you focus in on that. But in the concept of like light and darkness, we've been working on this project for a post-apocalyptic setting, and literally the side effects of you know the hosts of light and the beings of darkness clashing overhead and throughout the region, in and of itself, can be its own hazards. Whether it's um, the PCs are so low level, there's no way they could ever get involved in a war where the forces of good and evil are like literally blotting out the sun overhead. The what we would consider clouds on a nice sunny day are not clouds at all, but the falling, ravaged bodies of angels and demons falling to the ground, and the PCs need to navigate around those kind of things. And this is where we can start to draw upon and get really creative with some of the things that might be happening in the world, whether it is the sounds and the screams of angels, or the blasphemous um, curses that are spilling out of the voices of the demons that are overhead, the spilling of blood, the cracking of radiant power or necrotic energy that sweeps down from the sky. And all of these things can happen, whether they are you use a random table, or everyone rolls a die, and whoever gets the lowest roll gets targeted by the thing that's I don't know, raining down above them. Or maybe the ground has been mutated into something else, like the the when an angel slashes a demon and their blood spills down on the earth, maybe that in and of itself creates some other hazards the player characters need to navigate around. And one of the great things I think about exploration is that you can still let the player characters shine in what they do, but they may not be able to solve the situation by hitting it about the head and shoulders. Meaning, like, rolling combat may not be the way to solve it. It might need to, player characters may need to run or hide or dodge or climb, swim, all kinds of things to navigate around whatever hazardous thing there is. And that hazard might be pretty lethal for them. Now, we do have to say that fifth edition is a game that has placed obstacles in its design, has placed obstacles in the way of survivalist gaming. There are a host of elements in the game that have created what some people are calling the Ranger problem. In other words, they have created automatic successes to prevent the game master from actually placing hazards in front of the players. For example, there's never getting lost, always finding shelter, always finding food, and um, on paper it sounded cool, and I'm sure in their heads it sounded really cool. But in hindsight, automatic successes are really it actually removes the threat of the thing in the first place, to the point where nowadays we have people who are running games and they don't put those things in the game at all. It's as if it doesn't even exist. And so I think that's a detriment to our gaming philosophy. Like if they were to, the reason I think one of the reasons why Dark Sun isn't a setting is because they would have to edit out so many things that make Dark Sun as a setting not useless, but uh, insignificant, that I think it's very difficult for them to go in and go, well, guess what, everyone? No, you can't use this. No, that doesn't work. No, you can't have these other things. And I think saying no to players could be pretty detrimental. Mike says the echoes of the screamers, the ashes of obliterated celestials and fiends, the occasional blood rain, Monday. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, and I think there are the confluence of narration, the narrative, and the mechanical aspects. I think are can be pretty cool. Meaning, like if players have to figure out a way not to hear something, because literally hearing the screams of the flayed celestials that are like 10,000 of them pinned to the side of a mountain as they scream out in excruciating pain from the demonic hordes that pin them there. Like, how do you the narrative effect of that? I'm going to stuff cotton in my ears. I'm going to wrap my cloak around my head so I don't hear anything or something. And then it's like, well, you do realize you can't hear your allies now, or maybe you have to make a save, or suffer the deafened condition, or you suffer the effects of I don't know, Thunder Wave or Charm Monster or Vicious Mockery, so on and so forth. And so I love how um, being able to hear, being able to see, having too many things in your hands, having to walk carefully, those kind of narrative aspects can become mechanical aspects when players are like, oh, you're right, I am scaling a I don't know, a sheer cliff. How many hands do I have? I've got to hold on. Plus, I've got my arcane focus. Plus, I have my I don't know, uh, magical components. Plus, I'm pulling out a potion. It's like, yeah. And plus, you have a readied weapon and a shield. Yeah, maybe not. Oh man, Mike says the mutated colossal worms creating temporary earthquakes to armies of headless undead victims of execution, and of course Taco Tuesday, and of course Taco Tuesday. Yeah. Oh man. Mm-mm-mm. I don't know how hungry I'd be in a world like that, but you get the point. Deadman says in Tiny Tina's assault on Dragon Keep, Tiny Tina. Hmm? There's one part with dialogue. Tina, the DM, you enter the forest of tranquility. Brick, boring. Tina, you're right. I need to come up with something. After a minute, Tina says, "Idea." Pop up area discovery dialogue. Yep, forest of being eaten alive by trees. Yeah, I think I'm not saying that you can't have combat encounters during an exploration. I mean, sure, of course you can, but what exploration does is, as we've mentioned here on the channel before, not only should a dangerous travel be dangerous in and of itself, but it also gives us the opportunity to lore dump, you know, through action, right? If you're going through the accursed desert and they encounter deserty things and accursedness in that travel, and that becomes your 5-room dungeon where you have your guardian or entrance, and then you have your problem, and you have your setback, and you have your conflict, and then you have your reward or premonition or twist or something at the end. Then creating an outside dungeon, an exploration dungeon, is just a dungeon without a roof over it and without rooms. You meet something by a riverside, and then you meet somebody by a waterfall, then you go through the tall plains grass, and then you're in the hilly region, and then you go into a forest. Like, just each region as you travel becomes the next dungeon room. And why it is we don't think that way, I'm not really sure why. But oh well. Michael says the Outlander background is one that never gets lost and always finds food. If I may, this setting needs its own custom backgrounds. You may want to restrict classes or spells, for instance. No druids, or no Goodberry, make Leomund's tiny hut unknown. Now, one thing though I will say, I'm reluctant to I'm reluctant to like restrict classes and abilities. I would rather modify them. Like for example, I think something that we don't like what Mike is mentioning, that the Outlander background is one where you never get lost and you always find food. I think if you if I could be a little pedantic in this instance, um, the fact that you can always find shelter and find food doesn't assuage the threat of your food being somewhere that's dangerous, or your shelter being placed in a location that in and of itself might be dangerous around it. Like, for example, you might point across a raging river and go, "Oh, there's food right over there." You still got to go get it. You still got to get it back to where you've made your camp, right? The two don't necessarily need to meet head on. It's like it's finding the gaps in like dark vision. A lot of people say, "Well, everyone's got dark vision, so dark vision isn't a hazard any longer." And the actual answer to that is no. Dark vision has a lot of limitations on it. It's got a range limitations on it because you can't see beyond. You don't know what's happening beyond your range of vision in the dark, and also black and white vision, which I pointed up. Don't come across any liquids because you're not, unless you taste it or smell it. Mm, is that blood? No, no, that's urine. No, let me. That's mud. No, wait a minute. That's a gray ooze. I can't tell the difference. You know what I mean? Like you don't know. And dark vision gives disadvantage or -5 on perception checks. So it, I think we, by hand waving the never getting lost and always finding food, what we're not doing is saying yes, you do these things, but it's like yes but or yes anding, like, well, the thing exists but whatever. I do agree with like once you start adding in the good berries and the tiny hut spells and things like that, it pretty much makes travel and survival, um you might as well just hand wave it away. And I see how difficult it is because you end up having to remove things from player characters' abilities. I wish there was I wish during the inception of fifth edition they were like, oh, we're going to make rules that are modules, meaning they were going to have modular rule sets. And I wish they stuck to that. I don't think they've brought that up in years, maybe a good 5 years or something. Mike says, riffing on Dark Sun and no metal, perhaps this world lacks certain expected D&D norms, replaced with other norms. Oh, I definitely agree with that. I always worry about the, not worry, it's as long as you state things up front, like a Dark Sun, where you're like, oh, there's no metal in this world, and there's nothing of this and that, because you always have players uh, butting their heads against the rules that you've already stated. And while I find that annoying, it does one of those things where, um, whether if someone were to put out a if WotC were to put out a Dark Sun setting, you'd get complaints from players like, I can't play a Warforged. This game is stupid. And you're like, well, that's kind of the point. You're a metal construct. They don't exist here. Bye. Um, Chris Lewin, Lewin? I'm going to butcher your last name. I'm calling you Chris. Says, I'm sure oozes wouldn't taste too bad. They're called black pudding for a reason. with a side of a gelatin, and although you might not want any brown mold on your food. What's the other ones? Puddings, jellies, gelatin, mold. I can't remember the rest of them. Yeah, although it would be pretty hilarious that a gray ooze does taste pretty good. Some black pudding. Mike says, "Oh, okay. So perhaps make animals that are are edible a challenge. Poisonous thorns on plants with edible roots. Fish are plenty, but they're piranhas. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Have you seen WebDM stuff? They've released a new book that refills the exploration pillar and tries to make up for things like the Outlander, just letting you ignore food. Oh, I don't think you know me too well. um, I've got 9 books on drive through RPG that deal with this, that are called the cinematic environs. It deals with different environmental effects. Of course, I listen and watch WebDM. I think from back during their inception when they used a dry erase board behind them. Anyway, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, and I've joined the Kickstarter for Weird Wastelands. Yep, yep, yep. I think I'm like number 1717 or something like that, or whatever. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yes, absolutely. And I have zero problem with people saying, "Hey, guess what? In my world, this thing doesn't exist." It's unfortunate that it's the conundrum of us creators. Do you design a game that has very little to it and you have to tack things on it, or do you design a game that has everything in it, and in order to achieve the desire you want you have to say no to certain things? And that's always a conundrum when it comes to being creative. Mike says, when I made Ember, I stated up front in a player handout that steel was very rare. If the players know ahead of time, they adapt. It's the surprise condition that they balk at. um yes, but in our social media world where everyone has their own platform, I'm going to kindly disagree with you on that fact. Like, what's so weird today is that there are people in the community that complain that a thing they don't care about, other people have, and they don't like it. They don't like that it exists. Not that other people are doing it, that they don't like that it exists at all. I bring up the battle wheelchair as an example, right? And it's unfortunate that things like that gain traction um, in someone else's game. You know what I mean? Like, if Dark Sun existed, you're going to get complaints from people that Dark Sun doesn't allow me to do the thing that I want to do that I've always done before. Never mind the fact that they wouldn't play in that setting in the first place, nor is it appropriate for their style of play, right? But uh, it'll happen though. It'll happen. Um, but going back to what you said, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, if you stayed up front, hey, guess what? This is the thing that you can't have. Um, Now, I think there's some middle ground. Like, for example, there are some people who really desire like, for example, a low magic setting. And they're like, every class has magic. There shouldn't be any magic. And I want to run a low magic setting, and I can't do it in 5th edition. There might be, when I say middle ground, there might be effects that players have that, though they are listed as arcane or spell effects, within the setting, they aren't spells at all. Pass Without Trace might just be a very highly skilled individual. It's not necessarily a spell, for example. Or what is it? True Strike or something might not be a spell, though the words used are spell. It might just be someone who's very accurate. Mike says, the reality is that you cannot please everyone. Exactly. Sometimes to create a new thing, you need to challenge players' expectations. The whole idea of adventuring is that the characters leave their comfort zone. You know what? Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Pet peeve. Why are there players out there that make characters that aren't adventurers? I want to open up a bar. Really? Really? I want to settle down and sell bolts of cloth. Seriously? I literally designed, I literally pulled out my Planescape books, and all you want to do is be a business owner? Yep. I want to get a 1.2% on my earnings. That's it. But anyway, back to the third pillar of exploration. We know that there's a lot of obstacles to making exploration feel dangerous or lethal. And one of the muscles that we need to use in our creativity is to create obstacles and problems for players and then let them be creative in their problem solving. Unlike a regular puzzle, like a Rubik's Cube, or you must answer a riddle to get through a door, what we don't want to do is lock doors behind players, right? I mean, in front of players. If you have a raging river and a rickety old wooden bridge, and they have to finagle a way to get 5 tons of material across it, and they're creative in doing it, then we need to be open-minded and go, oh wow, that's a very creative idea. Okay, sure. The wizard using um, a floating disc, used to be called Tensor's floating disc, to pile a bunch of heavy stuff in it, and the wizard, who's lightweight, walks across the wooden bridge. If that solves the problem, that's a very creative thing. Now, mind you, they might be ambushed halfway across the bridge, and you have doing a bunch of things. You know, yeah, Mike's agreeing with me. He's like, right? Like, I'm going to raise pigs. Okay, so Fred's character retires. Fred, roll a new character. But yeah, sorry, Fred. This table's for heroes. And Morton Joe has declared you mediocre. Yeah, it's like, I'm going to retire my character. Great, get another character. Well, why can't I play? Because you're serving drinks. Roll sleight of hand to see if you spill something this month. You know, I get that some people. I get that sometimes a person playing a game might say, you know what, it's time to retire my character. That's cool. I have zero problem with that. Or the person who makes the paladin in a bunch of murderous thieves and goes, yeah, I don't know. I don't think my paladin really needs to be here. Can I make another character? I'm like, okay, go ahead. Let's go ahead and do it. But when it comes to people that make characters don't fit, like, why did you do that? Alley-oop77 says, let them do that. Just let them let shit hit the fan that detour this mundane activity that forces them to adventure. Yeah, well, now see that we come into the proverbial problem of, does the character want to retire, but the player's willing to adventure? Or does the player literally not want to adventure, right? Like, there's plenty of what the classic, my first level wizard is a bookworm and I don't want to adventure, but the player is like, oh yeah, I'm going on the adventure, but my character is going to complain the whole time, right? There's a difference to that. There's a difference between, yeah, I made a shop owner who happens to grab their ancestors' blade and shield and go out adventuring even though they don't want to, but the player has chosen, I'm going I'm going to make excuses why I'm going along, right? So there's a difference between that. Going back into our blood war here, um, I, I wish, and maybe this might be something that we could create on our own. I wish there were. I need to find a descriptor here. Environmental monsters and conflicts. What I mean by that is, I don't mean two devas and an archon and a planetar fighting the PCs or something, or five bone devils and a pit fiend or something. What I mean is, if your player characters are looking up in the sky and literally the sky is being rendered by, dare I say, millions of angelic beings clashing against fiendish creatures spilling out of rifts and portals, and literally the blackened blood and the burning ichor and the tears of the host of angels falling down to the sky, out of the sky onto the ground. I really wish there was a we as a community have embraced the idea that some of these monsters you can't fight one on one, but they create an environment that in and of itself becomes dangerous. Like the Tarask is a perfect example. The Tarask is Dungeons and Dragons Godzilla. It's the stand-in for the kaiju, right? And supposedly this thing is supposed to go around and devastate landscapes and all this kind of stuff. And literally its existence is supposed to reshape worlds, continents and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like the Tarask's presence itself should be dangerous to people miles and tens of miles and hundreds of miles around. The walking of the Tarrasque should create earthquakes. The Tarrasque should reshape rivers and things like that. And I feel like the gaming wise, that's never really been embraced. Yeah, Mike brings up yeah, sentient storms, mudslides, and the like. Oh yeah, yeah, literally raining blood, necrotic lightning shooting out of the sky. Like I mentioned before, the screams of the dying. um, way I don't know what it would sound like, but waves upon waves of fiendish demons and devils and daemons screaming out curses that we've never heard before on the earthly plane. If you think your mofos and FUs are pretty bad, think what put downs they would have. It's much like, I guess it would be like a listening to like George Carlin and Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle all at once in your ear, like at full blast or something. I don't know. Mike Gould says, "Hell, I've had a Shadowrun character retire and get married. He'd seen too much and needed to move on." Okay, but the whole idea in most RPGs are that the PCs are different and exceptional. They adventure. Exactly. Exactly. Oh man. Mike says, I like using purple worms to create tremors and collapsing structures. A 10-foot diameter creature burrowing under the ground and pushing things aside would devastate terrain. Exactly. Exactly. And I I feel like, okay, all the things I'm bitching about right now actually exist in the game, but they are scattered throughout the rule sets as we speak. For example, um, you can absolutely positively reskin damn near any spell you want as an environmental effect. Now, that environmental effect could be, and you've heard me use these terminologies before. It's been a while since I brought them up. You can have static effects, escalating effects, randomized effects, some what I call sometimes cyclical effects, and things like that in the environment. Especially if you want to do like battlefield manipulations, like maybe the player characters come upon a tribe of ogres that are also trying to survive in this devastated world, while the ramifications of this battle between good and evil are happening overhead. And so if that happens, maybe the battlefield has been affected, like, again, bloody mudslides, or literally lightning striking out of the sky and shattering mountainsides and causing landslides, or the screams of the angels being, their bodies being flayed asunder, and it's causing insanity or confusion or deafness and so on and so forth. And a lot of these things are actually spell effects. And what you could do is just make things random. In the cinematic environments books, we call it evening the odds. Just pick up any die, roll it, and you become a target for the next round. If you roll an odd result, you want to even the odds. If you roll an even result, you're not a target. If it's odd result, you are. So maybe those necrotic lightning bolts, you might have to rethink your plan of action, because a blackened bolt of lightning might strike out of the sky and strike near where you're located. And the randomization could be anything from flames shooting up out the ground to I don't know, being blinded by the light of an angel's body being ripped open, and you happen to look up, and the light might blind you, to uh, trying to climb over, I don't know, thousands of dead bodies of angels and demons all lashed together, dead, smoldering in the in the sunlight or something like that, and a random hand reaches up and tries to grab your ankle or whatever. Little things like that, where these could be scattered amongst the battlefield, and they could have a randomized effect on what's going to happen when the players are like, "Oh, I'm going to use a fireball. Ooh, I'm going to have to change my mind on that one." you know. Um, anyway, Mike says, "Well, anything large or bigger that burrows will have a similar effect." Yep, ankhegs, boulets, they'll create uh, troughs in the earth. Boulets, bullets, land sharks. Large swimming creatures will create wakes and whirlpools. Yeah, in aquatic depths we put in surge for like large creatures and bigger, that literally them moving through the water, and actually things that aren't aquatic, like giants that stomp through a lake or something, can create a wake or whirlpool or something, or ocean surge or something like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mike says, in our own world, how often have small craft suffered from the wake of larger craft, or flipped by a breaching whale? Imagine these problems in a fantasy setting. Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah. Um, Listen, we love our undead, but if you're in a swamp on one of those flat bottomed boats, and in waist deep water are like zombies and skeletons that try to flip your boat over in a swamp, that's the confluence of the two things kind of makes makes you want to makes the sphincter pucker, right? It's And I think that's undersold. So whether you're whether I don't know. There's such thick smoke in this battle ravaged world that it's not even like fog, but it's actually black, and it's like thick, and it sweeps across the landscape, or something akin to like will o wisps. As the blood of angels drips down to the ground, and it spews out, that to create these orbs of light that are like swirling, these radiant swirlings around, and though they are pure, no human being on the prime material plane is pure enough to be touched by the pure energy of radiance from the goodly creatures or something. And the PCs are like, we need to duck out of these things, that are swirling around and coming after us or something. Whatever the case might be, I feel like there's always space for players to navigate around a thing. It's always cool to punch somebody in the throat. It's even cooler if you're punching somebody in the throat, hanging off of a cliffside, or standing in waist deep waters, or crossing across a fallen tree where underneath there's lava or acid or something flowing underneath you, or one of your allies gets trips and falls and gets pulled down the raging river, and you're like, do I attack the monster again, or do I throw a rope to my friend who's getting swept away, or all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Mike says, so your apocalyptic setting could have lakes of blood filled with massive bloodworms. Exactly. It might have massive areas of rubble that act like large particle quicksand. They may be chasms chilled with torn asunder yet still moving undead parts. Yes, hands, arms, heads, all twitching and moving, trying to escape. Nightmare fuel. Oh, hell yes. Oh, hell's yes. Could you imagine? Hey, look at that forest, and you realize like the forest is dead, but it's just people stapled to trees that are screaming out in horror and trying to reach for you, or the literally navigating what look like hills, but they're literally piles and piles of dead bodies and undead, and you have to navigate around and over top of them and through them, and there's arms reaching out for you, and I mean, maybe the rain starts to come down and it's like blood red, or it's blackened, and the PCs need to get find shelter, but they find the shelter and it's starting to flood, and who the hell wants to swim in blackened murky waters that's the blood of demons spilling out of the air and all this kind of stuff? Yeah, why not have that happen? And you guys know me, I love BFF monsters. Who's to say you split open a demon and an ooze doesn't come out, or I don't know, a shadow monster, or whatever the case, whatever you come up with in your world, that the slaying of one creature creates in and of itself another hazard for something else. And some of our favorite monsters themselves can become environmental hazards, just like spells, creatures as well. An ooze doesn't need to be alive. It could just be a pool of, it's not a gray ooze, it's a pool of acid that acts as a gray ooze, right? Or it could be, now that it's raining, you go, oh, let me flip through the book. Ooh, I love black puddings. Okay, well, it's the effects of a black pudding raining out of the sky. But if you find shelter, it's not going to come after you. It's not sentient. It's just, I'm just going to use the effects of this monster as a thing. Yep, absolutely. Mike Gould says, or mix the two. Two words: zombie frogamoth. Yeah, zombie anything. Undead, add lich to anything. Yeah, yeah. Froggy moths. Yep, absolutely. Deadman says I added a couple kaiju for inspiration in the Discord. Oh, let me take a look. Mm-mm-mm. Colossal kaiju. That looks like a giant mole. Demi King. Let me take a. Let's see if we can get this bigger. A star-nosed mole. Ooh, the star-nosed mole from Stars. That is pretty interesting. That's awesome. That's awesome, dude. The I don't know. I just I'm an old man telling kids getting off my lawn. I guess. I guess I'm coming across. Sorry about that. Mike says chariots pulled by dominated screamers, driven by a pit fiend wielding a whip made of undead leathery worn husks. Sure. Exactly. um and of course we can start to reskin some of the things that are out there, like instead of instead of undead they might just be people driven mad and insane. They are, while they might not, the human population might not be undead, they are effectively like undead, because even if you chopped off their arms, they've been driven so mad from the Lovecraftian horrors they're seeing about them, that they're literally like ripping off their own flesh, and they're trying to rip your flesh asunder or something like that, looking for uh, trying to burrow their way to a safe space inside of your body or something. Like who knows? Hell, you could make there might be the opposite of madness might be bliss. That there are some people that have seen the been touched by the light of the celestial goodness, that they cannot see the horrors around them, even when they're suffering harm and damage or something. Yeah, they want to embrace you, spread the light of truth and justice and grace to you, and you're like, don't you see the horrors around you? And they're like, no, come, let me embrace you. Let the light of goodness envelop you. And you're like, I can't survive that. I'm not going to turn into a mindless husk who sees nothing, who's blinded by their own by their own, or not their own, but blinded by the lights that you know makes them see nothing but goodness around them as they step over the dead bodies of children or something. Mike Gould says, riffing on a conversation from months ago, this world of broken magic might have massive stone golems that wander the lands covered with scaffolding and structures and used by nomadic cultures. Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, people living on the backs of giant golems and stuff. Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, walkers. Lord Star Foxy, here we go. A post apocalyptic setting where magic has come to the modern world, where technology no longer works except things that run on gas and guns because electricity no longer works. You're talking about, there was a show about that. There was a show. Oh, Revolution or something like that, where suddenly everything just shut down. There was no electricity, and there was no way to turn the power back on, even if you knew it wasn't that it was just shut down. It was like it wasn't working at all. But I like that idea. All right. So anyway, the I think something else, and mind you, if you go over, check out the journey rules over at Level Up 5e. We I was one of the contributing writers to come up with a way to make exploration just as robust as combat. And one of the things that happened is you could assign players could assign themselves certain functions when it comes to travel, and then do a risk reward on the function that they are performing during travel. What I mean by that is maybe somebody scouts ahead, so they become the scouting party. Someone else wants to make a shelter, and they're the person that gathers things for a shelter. Someone else might hunt for food. Someone else may gather wood for the party. Someone else might be the navigator, and so on and so forth. Someone else might be the bring morale to the party. There's nothing that helps when you're depressed than having somebody who's very good at telling stories, or keeping everyone's spirits up, or likes to entertain each other with everything from ghost stories to um, striking up great conversations to uh, hell, just wondering if somebody's okay because they've got a blister on their foot, And each person in the party might take up that role, and then we can assign maybe skill effects to that, or die rolls, or just narratively have them help out the party, and then do like a little bit of a risk reward where maybe you give them some kind of benefit or a bonus or a boon for performing this job function very well. Like, my bard has performance. I'm going to keep everybody's spirits up. Great. Make your performance check. Ooh, I rolled a 4. Ugh. you know, well, maybe the songs you came up with, didn't work out very well, or you've got a frog in your throat, or every time you strum upon your lyre, the string keeps breaking, and everyone's like, whatever, I'm going to bed, and everyone goes to bed pissed off or something. I don't know how that would work, but but you get the point. Also, when it comes to exploration, and Mike, you've brought this up before. We need timers. We, in our back pocket, as dungeon masters and game masters and storytellers and stuff, we need as many tension timers as possible. Anything to keep the players moving. If there's no reason to push the tension, the players are not going to feel like there's any threat. And actually, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, if you go over to Tome Shows, the podcast, they're reading the Dungeon Master's Guide, 5th edition. Well, they've read all of them, but in this 5th edition one, it even states, like, if they have 10 times the amount of time it would be necessary to perform the function, don't even bother rolling. They automatically succeed, right? But if they're going through the accursed desert and there's sandstorms and quicksand and desert raiders and dehydration and so on and so forth, if they have to worry about all these things, if there's tension, that means, sure, they could wait 3 weeks, but they may need to be there in 3 days. And then when they get distracted, the barbarian's like, I'm going to have another combat. And PCs are like, dude, we don't have time for you to go in combat. We've got to get from A to B. Yeah, tension creates drama. And I think that's where one of the triangles of conflict, you have your protagonist, you have your antagonist. But what's that third element? Let's go to a classic dungeon. Door slams behind PCs. Okay, let's go with something a little bit more relevant. Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia inside the Death Star, and Luke is on a platform shooting at stormtroopers. Pew, 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 pew. Princess Leia picks up a gun. Pew, 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 pew. And guess what happens? The platform they're on starts moving into the wall, little by little. So the goal of that was not, let's shoot a bunch of stormtroopers. It was, oh shit, we got to swing across this bottomless chasm without handrails and get to the other side. Grab onto me. I'm going to use my cable and swing across from one. You know what I mean? The goal of that was not shooting stormtroopers. It was, we need to get from A to B as fast as possible, because shooting the stormtroopers is not getting us anywhere. It is, we need to get off this platform. And so, quickly getting across a raging river where there's enemies behind you, or navigating across the rickety wooden bridge before it collapses, or finding shelter before the sandstorm pulls in, getting under the rocky overhang before the blood spills from the skies, or getting into the deep valley to get away from the screams and the of pain as the celestial host falls out of the sky, and the demons try to, the demonic horde focuses attention on you and whatnot. Maybe that's the goal, and not, pulling out my axe and hitting things about the head and shoulders. And I think that's where that part of us in the creative space has lost its tension. That muscle has been atrophied. Mike says, hell, I can remember an old campaign where our table had an airship crash in a massive desert. Ooh. Finding water, food, and shelter every day was a massive struggle. The environment was an antagonist. Exactly. And it also the the reward of success might not be magic items. It might be literally food and shelter might be the reward. And it also gives a good it also creates great motivation for things that are in the world. Why why wouldn't the goblins steal your food source? Why wouldn't the owl bear knock you down and steal the rations off the back of the pocket halfling, right? Why wouldn't the I don't know, the hippogriffs sweep down and try to steal the carcass of the animal you just killed that you were supposedly going to skin and have for dinner, and it leaves off without it, or the hobgoblin warriors try to surround you and demand all your necessary water for that you've collected for a long time, or kidnap your cleric who has the ability to create food and water, or they threaten to kill the druid who's creating the good berries if you don't create good berries for them as well. It now you have motivations and tension and struggle in there, and I I, I feel saddened about this. Mike Gould says more recently, while running Ember, the players just wanted to get from point A to point B, but failed to look out for local wildlife. They happened upon a pack of raptors trying to eat a large plant-eating dinosaur. It became a two-pronged chase scene. Yeah. Also, the environment and the things around the environment also, like I said, a big lore dump. Maybe the world keeps moving when the player character sits still. Like, for example, every encounter doesn't need to be one of classic video gaming where every time you turn the corner, there's a perfectly placed adversary there. You know, why not have a dragon turtle that's diseased in a swamp? Why not have dehydrated orc tribe that is desperately looking for food and water and shelter? Why wouldn't there be elves that left the woodlands that has been driven mad after hearing the screams of fiends and angels in this massive war? Why not? Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't you come upon a monster that's been uh, still alive but half eaten, and now you're like, okay, whatever can rip open the shell of a dragon turtle and eat part of it is still around. So it must be pretty dangerous. Where the hell is this thing, right? And the dragon turtle's like half mad with pain and anger and dying, and is only going to live for 3 rounds. But the PCs come up, and it's just like spewing out steam from its nostrils at anything that comes near it or whatever, and it's just thrashing its tail and whatnot at the player characters. I mean, those are the things where a dragon turtle that's an environmental hazard because half of it was eaten and because its shell was ripped open, and it's not moving anywhere, but it's going to die pretty soon. Yeah, that might be a danger, and the players might need to maneuver around it and wonder what the hell took a big bite out of the side of a you know giant dragon turtle and what it could be. Mike says also environmental and social repercussions. Yep, adventurers who adventurers who attack, say, a hill giant's cave and then just walk straight home may have the surviving giant visit their home. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget aftermath. Okay, player characters kill a couple of hill giants. Great. Aren't their bodies going to, oh, I don't know, decompose and bring other predators and scavengers? And how about player characters that don't wash off the blood of their bodies? They smell bad, and there's lots of things out there that can smell and track a party of adventurers a long way. Yeah, yeah. Mike continues on and says, I can remember my players finding a massive river crocodile crushed against a tree. They looked everywhere except up, where the giant constrictor snake was waiting for more prey. Yeah. Hey, why is the alligator dead? They keep looking around and they don't look up in the tree. Hells yes. Yeah, maybe a predator has already made a kill, right? And then the player characters come upon that animal, and that giant predator, that beast, is like, "You're not going to take my food." And the players are like, "Whoa, Hey, Owlbear, I know you just killed a couple of goblins and you plan on eating them. We're going to leave you alone if you just leave us alone. Or heck, solving the issue. Maybe a player solves the issue by like, you know what? I'm going to leave my food right here and I'm just going to step away. Right? That might solve the, I don't know, displacer beasts that have been running around the dark woods, and the displacer beasts are temporarily placated by you dropping off some of your foodstuffs, your jerky that you left out of your pack or whatever. Sure, maybe the displacer beast might still come hunting after you, but maybe you give yourself a good day or two head start. So um, lastly, let me just say that I like to ramble on. Of course, you guys know that. But I think there's still space and there's still time and energy left for us to learn new ways of running games. And just by throwing in just one little environmental thing, just one little thing, whether it's heights, height distances, spatial distances, whether it is something weather related, maybe some rain or fog, maybe the ground itself is treacherous. I think there's more than just difficult terrain, which is to me personally is boring. It's very static. There's no interaction. There are other things that can happen, meaning like maybe like on a frozen lake, you fall prone, but maybe it's very difficult for you to stand up. You got to make an acrobatics check or a dex saving throw to stand back up. Maybe there are other elements involved. If you're on a muddy hill and you fall down or you fall prone or you're knocked down, you slide down the hill and now you got to scramble your way back up that same hill. Same thing would happen in, say, like a whirlpool or a valley or a siphon or a bowl funnel or something. There, maybe there are things that are dangerous to touch in the environment. If you touch the thing, it might be harmful, like fruit that collapses and releases a gaseous pollen that you could choke on it, or you're going through a swamp and there's flammable gases. So remember, I said early on at the top. I see your comment there, Mike. But remember, I said at the top about random and escalating and stimulated, or called activated or stimulated encounters and things like that. Some of these things we can layer on into our environment to make them, more interactive, more dangerous, and put. Honestly, you want to put all the onus onto your players. Let them bring about their own downfall from the dangers that you've already foreshadowed for them in the first place. If they go through the dark forests that have been with the trees that have fed on the blood of fiends that have been slain in this titanic battle, and the fruit is very dangerous and it's not even ripe, it just grows rotten, and if the players touch it, it falls, it crumbles and falls and makes a poisonous gas. Then the players are like, okay, well, we're going to have to be careful, right? We've got to watch out for certain things. Like we got to make sure we don't touch the rotted fruit because we might choke to death or something. Or we've got to watch out, walking across the thin ice that I don't know, froze over the river because of the breath of the angels or whatever. I don't know. I'm just pulling something out of my ass, but yeah, putting the danger on them and saying, hey, putting something that's in the cinematic environments I wrote is an if then statements. There's a little sections called if then, like if the players do this, then this is the repercussions. If they don't perform the if, then the then doesn't happen, but it might be in their best/worst interest to engage in the thing. Mike says storms can come out of nowhere, creating mutations, spell effects, spatial distortions. Exactly. But going up to one of your comments, uh, Mike says, I can also remember a ranger just randomly shooting an arrow into moving bushes, wounding a bear cub. Ooh, mama was not pleased. Ow, ow. Yeah. Mike says, Thole, his setting, has something called wild storms. These are wild magic clouds with multicolored rain caused when the PCs dragged a piece of the Feywild through a portal. PC repercussions. And these storms can come out of nowhere. Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. Yeah. Mike says that's how 50% of the gnomes of Stavros capital city of uh, Ver Verbelt. Verbilt? I'm mispronouncing it. Sorry. Goblinized into goblins because I love me some political and social drama in my fantasy. Oh, I've always liked the idea that like goblins have the same origins as like gnomes, maybe halflings or something. Like there is uh, not a distinction, a connection between the two. I love that stuff. And what a great way to come up with your own thematic tables of wild magic surges. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'm going to share just before I get out of here. I'm going to share this table that I came up with. I just remembered that I even pulled it up. Uh, at one point, I had the intention of creating sorceress bloodlines using the. I'm going to have to close this down temporarily. Sorceress bloodlines using the wild magic surge, but the wild magic was thematic. And this it's a relatively long. Um, uh, wow, my brain just went out. Relatively long Google Doc, but what I did was I used the actual wild magic table they have, and then I just reconfigured it to meet something. So in this one, I put down of light and of darkness and light. An angel and devil rides on either shoulder. You are equal parts, the night and the sun, a being of shadow and light. You want no parts of this war between the celestials and fiends. You stand betwixt the two. Your legacy, your bane. And so, of course, you have percentile tables, and that I reconfigured them to correspond to what the wild surge table is, but I uh, reset them. So, for example, um, here we go. Uh, Shadows stand in stark contrast to your arcane eyes, light fracturing through translucent forms. For the next minute, you can see any invisible creature if you have line of sight to it by following its shadow and viewing its disruption of light. Here's another one, the very next one. If you roll, percentile dice, a 5 or 6, your shadow separates from its connection to your feet. A shadow. It is controlled by the DM, appears in an unoccupied space within 5 feet of you, then disappears 1 minute later by reattaching to your feet as oh, as a mundane shadow. What's something else? Here we go. If you roll a 13 or 14, black tentacles or a glowing celestial being appear in your space and remain for its duration. There is a 50% chance either will appear. You cast the black tentacles on a 1 to 3 or Guardian of Faith 4 to 6 spell centered on your space. Roll a d6. Right. One last one. The cache of pure daylight or blackest night seeps into your flesh from the inside out. For the next minute, you regain 5 hit points at the start of each of your turns. So, and this goes on and on. You know, how far did I get into the 70s or 80s or something like that? I can't remember. Goes to I stopped at 46. And then there's other ones in here, polymorphic and all that kind of business, but whatever. Let me turn this off. Let me get back into it. I know the chat disappeared, but we're going to get back into that. Let me turn this off as well. Sorry about that, guys. About to get out of here. Lord Foxy one time came up with a setting where players are mech pilots where they had to fight a lot of dragons, demons, and giants and other things of magic because magic in the world were, I guess, ruining it, or were they running it? I'm going to assume you meant ruining it. Yeah. It's so weird how the chat. If I take away the chat and then I come back, everything disappears. That sucks, but whatever. um, one of lastly, I will say that you guys know I'm a huge proponent of huge ass proponent of the environment, and I think if we just sell it just a little bit more, I think it just would be that much better for our games. And we don't have to limit ourselves to real world things, even though I use that as a basis for examples. wintertime, summertime, earthquakes, all that kind of good stuff. That's great because that stuff is lethal. But the other arcane things where there's wild magic storms and rifts opening up in time and space, and magic leaving a scar upon the land, i.e., dark sun or something like that. I think that's really cool. And I think that makes for better stories if we think about the aftermath of what the players have done or will do, or it magic having a real effect in the world, not necessarily mechanical, but sure, your pyromancer can start fires, but maybe over time they start opening up rifts to the elemental plane of fire, and one by one fire elementals start growing from just a simple ember of flame that they left 3 weeks ago, or uh, a player character has great psychic powers or something, and they start awakening other beings in the rest of humanity and their psychic potential, or um, there are other spellcasters around, and there's almost like a psychic link between all the people who cast spells. And when you cast a spell, they can tell who did it and when they did it and who learned from them. And the players know who, oh, I'm being followed by one of my old classmates. They became a wizard extraordinaire. They were a child prodigy. We're going to have to fight against them. Yeah, like Mike said, fields of sentient Everett's black tentacles. Yeah, feel free to get weird. Hell's yeah. Oh hell yeah. And like I said, these things might just be environmental effects, not summoned by any one person, right? They can last as long as you want them to last. They can be there because they just happen to be there. They could shoot up randomly. They could target certain characters because of who they are and what they are. It might be something that's escalating. Sure, the player looks down and it's like there's little small black tendrils, lapping at your ankles. Nothing's happening yet, but in roll a die, 4 rounds. Oh yeah, this whole field's gonna be filled with Everett's black tentacles. Yeah, like Mike says, or where your memories, or areas where your memories animate. Yeah. Oh yeah, you're a place where your greatest fears come about. I don't like insects. Spiders start coming out of the ground. I'm scared of heights. Giant bottomless pits start opening up in the ground around the player characters or whatnot. Everywhere you run, hey, stay still, and danger will befall you. So maybe it forces the players characters to have to keep moving or keep running, or the danger just keeps getting greater and greater. A meteor shower literally falls out of the sky and the damage keeps getting greater and greater. Next round, you're like, oh, I'm going to roll 3d6. And the player's like, 3d6? It was 2d6 damage last time. No, it's getting worse. Roll the dice. What? Oh, next round, 4d6 damage. Oh, 5d6. And the players are like, we need to get the hell out of here. This is terrible. Why not? So anyway, guys, have a great one. We can talk more about um, vectors of loss. We could talk about all kinds of like stacking elemental effects, linking elemental effects to 5-room dungeon, whatever the case might be. But we'll go on. We tomorrow we've got my brain is tomorrow we have Future Friday, and we're going to talk about light and darkness in that. Yeah, yep. Ride Shiny and Eternal. Thank you there, Mike. For some reason, my brain is just shut off. Too many hours at work. Guys, have a great one. I'll see you later.